All right, still on the porch, and let's get right into the Industrial Revolution. By the way, one of the class members suggested that we watch, and I'll let you guess who this was, that we watch Newsies. And it is available on Disney Plus. So what I need to know, if you do not have Disney Plus, let me know. Okay? If you do, you don't have to say I do, but if you don't, let me know. Just message me and say I do not have Disney Plus, and we'll go from there. I'm trying to find a link that we all could watch that, and that would count as a class or two, because it deals with the Industrial Revolution in this time period. But a couple of things just moving through. I know you read this yesterday, and I trust that you read it, but we're going to just go over a couple of things real quick. This is what made the Industrial Revolution possible. First of all, there was an adequate food supply. People had food to eat. For years, hundreds and thousands of years, people have scoured for food to eat. And if you wanted to eat, you had to plant a farm or garden yourself to feed your family. That started to change. Techniques improved. We had lots of farmland in other places. You could import food now. All of these things were happening, and so there was a good food supply. So everybody didn't have to farm. That lops over in the second reason. Since everybody didn't have to farm, if you heard, hey, you can move to such and such a city, you can move to London and get a job in London instead of having to farm up in northern England somewhere. Here's an opportunity for you. You could move. You could hop up, pack up everything, and move. So you had a mobile workforce. The third thing was the expansion of trade. You had trade that was expanded because of Britain and their imperialist ways, France and their imperialist ways, but especially Britain. I mean, they took over a lot of Africa and other nations. So you had places to trade. People were trading with different things. And because of that, it brings on the Industrial Revolution. Now, it starts with the Agricultural Revolution. Now, Jethro Tull was a rock band, but they got their name from a dude that developed the seed drill. Basically, and your book also mentions Charles Townsend as a planter developer. But basically, the seed drill, it had a hopper. You put your seeds in the hopper. Okay. Up in front, it had a little thing that would grate a little hole or a little trench in the ground. Okay. And then as it came through, this hopper is dropping seed into this trench. And in the very back of this seed planter machine was a little rake. And what it would do, so you've got this thing that trenches it. You've got this thing that shoots out the seeds or just drops them along the way. And then this rake on the back comes along and covers up the dirt. It's a seed drill or seed planter. Amazing technology, because before you had to get out there with a mule and a horse and whatever and a plow, and then when you wanted to plant the seed, you had to go along and you had to spread them by hand. So it made things a lot more automated. Robert Bakewell, he figured out effective breeding to produce bigger and larger farm animals, healthier farm animals. You take the best genetics here, you combine them together, let nature take its course, and the next thing you know, you've got stronger, healthier animals that weren't dying off. The enclosure movement was something. Farmers benefited from using certain open fields, but in the 18th century, Parliament made it much easier for wealthy landowners to incorporate these common grazing lands into their own estates and form large farms. So in other words, you could fence property and keep all this farm, and everybody wasn't using it. One person had it. The cotton industry is mentioned, and cotton is where we got a lot of our cloth, or most of our cloth. John Kay, he invented the flying shuttle. It was different than just sitting there and looming stuff over and over and over. This thing, you hit a lever with your foot, it would do it for you, and did it in speedy times. James Hargreaves, he came up with the spinning jenny, and the word jenny is derived from gin, the regional term for engine, your book says. Arkwright, Richard Arkwright, invented the spinning frame that not only produced thread superior to the spinning jenny, but was also powered by water. Now, one thing you've got to remember about the Industrial Revolution, it takes power to move any machine. You had threshers, wheat threshers that were developed for agriculture. It took power to run them. They, at one time, would take horses or mules, and they would walk in a circle to power these things. Water power becomes huge. Steam is going to become huge, but you've got to have anything can be powered if you put power behind it. Okay, I can take this drink and I can set it right here. This is my water bottle, and I can set it right here. I've got to have the power to lift it up to my mouth to take a drink. And if I could come up with some machine to do that, then it would be a powered water bottle. Right now, I'm providing the power. So power is going to become a big thing. Samuel Crompton, he invented the spinning mule. And Eli Whitney came up with the cotton gin. Now we know because of the cotton gin, slavery increased in the South. There was a huge demand. They shipped out tons and tons more of cotton after the cotton gin because you didn't have to have someone, and in this case in the South, it had to be slaves that would sit there and all day long pick those seeds, separate that cotton and take the seeds out. Now you had a machine, you threw in cotton, you moved it back and forth, and the seeds fell out. Amazing technology, very simple, but amazing. The factory became important. Factories became the norm in these big cities, and they built them in big cities because you had good shipping. You might build it on a coast, or you might build it where there was some type of good transportation system, road system. Number one, this is one of the significant changes that took place for the worker. They moved to an urban environment. Imagine moving from a rural somewhere to a big city. It was a change for people, but that's where the jobs were. You no longer owned your own tools. Before, if you wanted to work a trade, you had to have all the tools for that trade. Now you show up at the factory, you clock in, and everything you need is there in the factory. You no longer control the number of hours you worked. If you owned your own business before, you were a blacksmith. You had a blacksmith shop behind your house somewhere. If you didn't want to work today, pretty day, you want to carry the kids fishing, you go fishing. When you work a factory job, that all changes, and that's one thing that happened to the worker. And number four, you performed your work away from your family. Again, before, all of these businesses before, whether it was a family farm, or whether you were a seamstress, or whether you were a publisher or whatever, worked with a printing press, usually those were done on premises. You would have your house, and in the back of your house you would have some type of shop. Well, that changes, and people work away from their family. So the family life is going to change a little bit. We see about Henry Cort. Henry Cort invented the process in which iron ore was puddled or stirred in the furnace to rid it of its impurities. That was huge. Even bigger, Henry Bessemer. He found that shooting a jet of air into molten iron would get rid of the impurities, and they developed steel as a result. And we know that later on, around the turn of the 20th century, people are going to develop steel into skyscrapers and cars and everything else. James Watt, he designed the first practical and efficient steam engine. That was huge. There were other steam engines before, but James Watt, that was huge. It was efficient. It was safe, and it was water powered. It was practical to build. It was practical to use. There's a great video on YouTube. I know you probably won't look it up, and I'm not going to enclose it because this is going to go so long today. But there's a great video where they actually rebuilt one of Watt's first steam engines in a factory in England. And this thing's like 3 stories tall. It's an amazing, amazing engine. But steam is going to become the power source for all of these mechanisms, all of these tools, all of these gadgets, all of these things in factories. Amazing stuff. Transportation. John McAdam. They took rocks and they crushed them and he packed it down. It was very similar to what they do in the country nowadays. They macadamize a lot of roads around here in DeKalb County, and I'm sure they do in Jackson. I know they do in Jackson County, and I'm sure they do in other Dade County and other places. These small county roads that used to be dirt, they'll come along, they'll take crushed rock and they'll throw it out there and they'll pack it down. It's not concrete, it's not asphalt, but it's packed and it's a lot smoother than dirt. He developed that. Canals. We even see around this time during the Industrial Revolution when things start to happen in Buffalo, New York, and the Erie Canal comes along. Amazing process where they built that canal, and it modernized transportation. Richard Trevithick, he built the steam-powered locomotive. That's going to be huge. Robert Fulton, he did not invent the steamboat, but he made it practical and safe. They would have steamboats that would blow up on people. And Fulton develops one that's pretty safe, all in all. Orville and Wilbur Wright, you know about them. They invented the airplane and came up with that. And also, Henry Ford, he came up with the assembly line. Great idea. Ford watched these different factories, and they would build a car, and it would take them all day to build one car. And he noticed that all these people are doing different things. You know, you might be putting an engine part in here, and then you might be putting a door on in a few minutes, and you had a team of people working on one car. He thought, what if we put something where this person puts on 4 bolts all day long and this car moves along? So you put on your 4 bolts where they go, or 16 or whatever, lug nuts, whatever the case is. You put in your 4 bolts, this car moves down here a few feet, and this person to your right is putting on putting in their spark plugs, whatever. It was an assembly line process, very genius. Railroads, by the way, were not safe. There were accidents that happened. They would hit cattle. They would hit, a lot of times the tracks would come up and buckle, and they would crash. Sometimes because of the steam engines, they might shoot something through the passenger compartment, and it was not as safe as they are now. Steamships, the same thing, but Fulton made them a lot safer. Mass production. Your book lists that between 1870 and 1914, industrial production in Europe and North America more than tripled. You had automation, you had interchangeable parts, you had division of labor, and, as we've talked about, the assembly line. Now, the reason for, and Thomas Alva Edison, you know about him. Edison invented several things, including the phonograph. Because of Edison, we were able to hear people's voices. We don't know what Abraham Lincoln sounded like, but we know what Teddy Roosevelt, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And in 1877, he comes up with this phonograph. So, we know what Teddy sounds like, too. You could have recordings of people's voices. We don't know what George Washington sounded like. If we'd had a phonograph back then, we would. I figure it was, "Hi, I'm George Washington." I mean, who knows? But because of Thomas Edison, now you can listen to bands from the 1920s, 1930s, and know what they sounded like, and voices and what they sounded like, and we could dictate things into machines. He was also invented the light bulb, or he patented it. Motion picture projector, if you like to go to the movies, is because of Edison. And he wasn't alone. He had a team of folks working with him. He wasn't the only one, but he was very, very smart, and he was a genius. Crowded slums are going to develop. People are going to be tired. Work days are going to be long. Working conditions are going to be dangerous. There were machines, and they didn't care. The factories, as long as you produce the goods, they didn't care. You might be working on a machine, and you reach out to fix something, and you draw back a nub. That was part of the cost of doing business, CDB. And then you're going to see unions come in later, and people are going to say, hey, this is not fair, this is not safe. Kids were working in factories. Whole families were working in factories. It was a different life. Cities became nasty because more people moved to them. A lot of sewage, a lot of garbage, a lot of filth, and a lot of debauchery and sinfulness came to cities because all of these people now are living there. And when they have their time off, they want entertainment. A lot of times it's not the fun, wholesome kind of entertainment that you and I would want. Last thing I want you to know about this, and you read about this in your book as well, but the cool thing about the Industrial Revolution is prices of goods went down. When you have Henry Ford making cars on the assembly line, before a car would cost you like several years' wages. And then when Ford produced the assembly line, I think it was like 4 months' wage, something like that, 5 months' worth of wages, you could buy an automobile. The more you produce, there's supply and demand. If there's a demand for it, the more you supply, the lower the cost is. And I go back to big screen televisions. When they first came out, I was like, man, I love one of those, and they're like $1,200, $1,400. Now you can go to Walmart and you can get you a big screen TV for like $199, and it's nice. You know, the more things are produced, the more the cost goes down. People were able to afford, everyone was able to afford stuff, and now you have a lot of jobs. Okay. Responses to the Industrial Revolution, page 405. I want you to read 405, 406, 407, 408, 409, 410, 411, and 412. Read responses to the Industrial Revolution. It's basically talking about social reform. It's talking about its effect on Christianity, talking about the women's rights movement, wealth. Marxism is involved in this, but I want you to read this next section. You do not have to do anything other than that, but I do expect you to read it and be honest when you say done in the comments, and we will discuss this a little bit tomorrow. But read section 2, starts on page 405. Do not do the section quiz, but make sure you read it. Have a great day. Sorry I'm a little long. Love y'all. Praying for you. Miss you. Bye.